Field by field, Maizex is bringing Canadian seed to farmers across Canada. Maizex is your source for high-performance soybeans and grain, silage, and grazing corn hybrids. Visit maizex.com to find your local Maizex representative.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Tuesday, September 3rd. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. Yes, it is Tuesdays with Lyndsey, and I am Lyndsey. See how that all works? All right. Great show lined up for you today. We are back from the long weekend. Kids are back to school, and there's a lot happening, and there's a lot to prep for, because here in the Ottawa Valley, where I am based, it was mighty chilly this morning. Now, personally, I love it. But I am not corn and soybeans, and therefore there are a lot of crops around here that probably did not appreciate such a chilly start to the day. Certainly, though, there's a lot of news happening, and we've got some policy issues that are rumbling around that we're going to cover on today's show. We're going to talk about feed testing. And I have pulled a clip from last week's episode of the Agronomists. So yes, Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, except for holiday Monday, so there wasn't a show last night. Just FYI, everybody. I'm allowed to take some time off now and again. We have, of course, the show. The Agronomist goes live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all that sort of stuff. And last week we talked about applications by drone. So we did focus quite a bit on seed, even fertilizer, but we talked a lot about applying pesticides by drone. What are some of the hiccups? What are some of the hangups? And of course, the legalities of it as well. But I did want to share some of that because we also had a slight hiccup through the show. That's showbiz, baby, as they say. So I wanted to share some of that really great conversation that I had with George Gake, rhymes with cake, and Adrian Rivard. So that's an Alberta and Ontario perspective. Really great. So stick around to hear that clip. I've also got Ian Boxall. He's the president of the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan. We are going to talk about farmers having some assurance that they will get paid when they deliver grain to a licensed elevator or grain buyer. Of course, we had another company that had their license revoked last week. And if you are one of the impacted farmers, you actually have a pretty short window to let the CGC know that you are owed money. If you miss that window, even if you are owed the money, you may not be able to access a particular fund that's put up through the security that the grain company would have had to put up. And so they are, of course, the CGC that is encouraging farmers to let them know if they're owed money. But more importantly, as Boxall says, we are potentially at a point where the bond system, the security system that the CGC has in place, perhaps needs modernization and could be changed to better protect producers. So Boxall will join me right after the break here to have that conversation. Also on today's show, I've got Kristin Thompson. She's the interim extension coordinator with the Beef Cattle Research Council, and we are going to talk about feed testing, specifically forage testing, and how we go about it, why it's so important, and what to do with those results, because I think that's where a lot of us get stuck. Just like when you're growing crops and you get a whole bunch of data, then you have to ask yourself, now what? So the same thing happens with feed tests. We're going to talk about that as well. And then, of course, at the end of the show, we'll tackle as much news as we can. But we did, of course, get the big news today of China's retaliation on Canada's announcement of a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs, steel and aluminum. China has now said that they have launched an investigation into anti-dumping of canola into the Chinese market. And so that one well, if you've watched the markets, has already had a huge impact. We will continue with this story today and into tomorrow. If you're looking for the latest, head to RealAgriculture.com, as this is a very rapidly evolving story. All right, let's take a break, and I'll be back with more of Real Ag Radio right after this.
Farmers Edge Laboratories is here to support growers, agronomists, and retailers this harvest season with their soil testing. Experience superior customer service, fast results, and volume discounts with Farmers Edge Laboratories. Contact 204-233-4099, 204-233-4099, or email fe.labs@farmersedge.ca. The lab is now open to the public, agronomists, and retailers across Canada. Farmers Edge Laboratories, proudly serving Canadian agriculture for over 15 years.
We're at the Canadian Beef Industry Conference. Today's show is brought to you by Canada Beef. Make sure you check out canadabeef.ca. The new campaign, Pick the Beef with the Leaf. We are joined right now by the president of Canada Beef. It is Eric Bienview. What is the true role of Canada Beef in the sector?
Essentially, two sentences. Create value. For whom? Our producer and the entire value chain of the beef industry. Our goal is to make beef the protein of choice. That's it. How do we do it? Consumer marketing, channel marketing, global marketing, intel, research and development on nutrition, health, as well as the underutilized cuts to enhance the consumption. We have 300 cuts of beef. So what do? We're trying to optimize and increase value. Stakeholder communication, and drive growth.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. It is Tuesday, September 3rd. It is Tuesdays with Lyndsey. I know I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again because it is just such an amazing week. Here in Canada, most of the kids went back to school today, and that includes for our colleges and universities. Hats off to all of you continuing your education. And I just love the feeling of back to school. Super exciting, and all the best in the year to come. I sent my kids off to grades 11, 7, and 2 today, and it was a great day all around. So hope you had the same where you are. All right. This segment brought to you by Centuro Nitrogen Stabilizer. Protect your anhydrous ammonia and bottom line, even if temperatures hit 15 degrees or below. That's not too late to apply agronomically effective, non-corrosive Centuro Nitrogen Stabilizer. Learn more at centuro.ca. All right, we go now to a conversation that I had late last week with Ian Boxall. For those of you who were on our email list, which by the way, we send out an email every morning, head on over to realagriculture.com/subscribe and you can get in on that action as well. So Ian, though, did join me late last week to talk about the issue, of course, with some of the grain elevators, the food ingredient buying companies that have had their licenses revoked. A lot of these companies have a pretty huge presence in Saskatchewan. And so, of course, many Saskatchewan farmers are left with no income and having had their grain delivered. Ian is one of those farmers who is waiting for payout from one of these companies. And the Canadian Grain Commission, of course, has a program to try and deal with this. But Boxall and APAS are saying that perhaps it's time to modernize this program. And joining me now is Ian Boxall. He's the president of APAS, the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan. Ian, how are you?
I'm good.
It's good. Now, I do wish we were meeting under much happier circumstances, but we are not. We did hear just, I guess it was the 28th of August, that we have a fourth grain handling food ingredient company, that has had its license revoked by the CGC, by the Canadian Grain Commission, and that farmers who are owed money are being told to put in claims. As first, the president of APAS, how troubling is this for you to hear?
I think it's very troubling. And I think when it comes to APAS, we've had resolutions over the last number of years that the bond system that currently is in place for producer protection in this maybe needs to be updated and maybe needs to be looked at and modernized, as we've seen several companies over the last number of years had their licenses revoked for non-payment to producers. So it is a huge concern for producers. And I think as the CGC reevaluates its focus on producers, right, on it being producer-focused organization, this is one area where we really need to do they need to do their due diligence to ensure that they have it correct.
So in looking at, and Saskatchewan in particular has been quite hard hit by these 4 companies. Certainly some of them have had branches in Alberta or other provinces, but Global Food Ingredients, LSM Grain, Zegers, and now Purely Canada Foods have all had their licenses revoked. And on so far, at least on the Zegers side, we did receive word from the CGC that $1.2 million had been paid out to farmers. There was enough money there to cover that. So, but from that perspective, so walk us through, for those who aren't super familiar with how this works, the CGC does require that bond to be put up by these companies so that they can say they're bonded, they have that license. Where does this fall apart for you as far as where the policy is not necessarily meeting the needs potentially?
So I think currently under the system, the companies report, the grain buying company would report once a month on what their sales are, what is owed out to producers. Well, they could buy a lot of grain within 30 days. So 2 questions. Why is sharing of information on how much money they have owing to producers for deliveries, why isn't that more frequently than every 30 days? And why are they even allowed to buy above the bond?
Okay, right. Have you asked those questions with any good answer, or those are the questions you want answered?
Those are the questions we want answered. Mm-hmm. I also think it's been a number of years since this was even looked at to ever make changes to or any adjustments to. It's probably time. We've asked, the Grain Act review has been in place. Part of that is under the CGC. This falls into exactly what we talked about in our grain summit this winter. Early spring, this is what we've talked about for years at APAS, and this is something that it needs to be addressed. And I can speak firsthand because I am currently out just shy $159,000 in change myself by one of these 4 companies. So that was, I guess, from, there's the APAS perspective, but as you personally, as a farmer, I mean, I don't think anyone is going to say that that's an insignificant amount of money to be out. I mean, that is a lot of money to not be sure whether you're going to see it or not. So personally speaking, with that amount of money, that have you put in a claim for that? Like, where does that sit? So right I have, and I follow the time, like I got it in on the timeline, and farmers need to be aware that there is some strict timelines on this. And if you miss it, you are out. So ensure that, make sure you get a hold of the CGC, and I just would encourage producers, even if they're unsure, just make the call, find out the process, ensure that you're on the list. Because I also have heard of producers that have missed that 90-day window because we're busy, right? Like, and especially this time of year, we're going into harvest, and this is a bad time for this to happen with Purely Canada. But if you are owed money, ensure that you get a hold of the CGC and look after it. So My claim is from March, so I have been out almost $160,000 since March. It's stressful. That's money that I need. The margins in farming aren't good enough that I can just swallow $160,000. So it causes stress, and it causes cash flow issues. And I've had to borrow money to offset that, to put the crop in and do everything I've had to do, right? Because you count on that money coming in. When I sell it, I expect to get paid, as would anybody with any product. So I think we're fortunate that we have a system in place that works, but is it good enough? I don't think it is. So we need it examined. We need some of these questions answered, and we need to modernize it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So, and that, I guess, that is one of the points, is when your membership, asks questions about this process, about what's happening. Thinking just recently now, we're coming off of this, dual rail strike that thankfully didn't last that long, but that is a disruption to potentially cash flow as well. What is the sense of sort of the ongoing sort of mental stress and financial stress of having to navigate some of these systems that can take months to resolve?
I think lots of times when it comes to some of this stuff, farmers feel like they're running through that football thing where you're getting hit all the time by different issues. There's never anything in agriculture that's easy, and it always feels like we're getting hit with something, whether it be a potential rail strike or this or that. And And one of my other concerns with this issue is, as we see these four, it seems to be the specialty market buyers that are having trouble. And I feel for them as well. Okay, I do. But our province, in Saskatchewan especially, we have thrived and succeeded on those niche markets and those specialty crops. And what's going to happen? Am I scared to diversify my operation? Is it going to be wheat and canola? Because that's easy, because I know I can haul that to one of the big elevators and get paid. But yet the specialty crops are needed. They're wanted in the world, and we happen to be a huge grower of those. So there's concerns around crop rotation and whether or not this will scare guys away from diversity as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think it's a good point. And certainly, this many companies having licenses revoked in this short amount of time is quite staggering. It does create, I would imagine, a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questions for your growers.
Yeah, no, for sure it does. And what does it do to the market? What does it do to the price? If we have four buyers out of the market for some of these specialty crops, what happens to the price? I think we know what happens, right? The price goes down. I think that's, so I think there's concerns on all fronts on this, how it'll affect, crop rotations and what you choose to seed, how it'll, the security that producers feel when they go to seed or when they go to sell grain or when they go to sign a contract. And, when you add this one recently and the fact that they've had issues over a number of years with them canceling contracts. And so this issue has been ongoing with grain contracts and producer protection really to the forefront for the last 3 or 4 years. And it's, having 4 in the first 8 months of this year is very concerning.
Mm-hmm. Now, you did mention the Grain Act, which is, I feel like it is one of those things that for any of us who are of a certain age, has always been under review. It's just been this ongoing process that never seems to actually get to where it needs to get to. Is that where you see this potentially being addressed in some way, or do you think the CJC has the capacity to potentially make some positive changes with this program, regardless of an overhaul of the Grain Act?
Well, so our understanding is Grain Act review is done, that the legislation is in there and ready to be brought to the House. So clearly we've missed that window. So I sure in the heck hope that the CGC has the power and the ministry gives them the mandate to examine the bond system, ensure that it's working, and ensure that if it isn't, then give them the authority to make changes so it will work. With input from producer groups like APAS, like CAP in Manitoba, other groups that are involved, and understand it, ensure that we make sure it's right for producers, because I think we need to ensure that the CGC gets back to that. Their priority is the producer's last line of defense, right?
Thank you so much, Ian, for joining me.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and I'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
back to Real Ag Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. And remember, this is an important notice for grain farmers. The Canadian Grain Commission has revoked the licenses of Purely Canada Foods Corp. If this company owes you money for grain deliveries, call 1-800-853-6705 immediately. This is a message from the Government of Canada. As promised, I've got now a clip from last Monday, so the last Monday in August, a clip from The Agronomist that goes live every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, or you can head on over to realagriculture.com/agronomists. You can actually check out the show live when it's live, or you can see all our past episodes there as well if you want to check it out, or check us out on YouTube. We're there too. Anyway, lots of questions this year. Certainly you saw in July plenty of drones heading out over fields, and this is of course a big question of what can we do with drones, what is the best fit for them, and of course where are we at with the legalities of potentially using these bits of kit for applying pesticides. So a clip now. This features Adrian Rivard with Drone Spray Canada and George Gake with Olds College. George, Adrian brings up a good point about trafficability potentially of a field at different times of year. Is that a question that comes up as far as the application of when you would choose a drone over perhaps some other way of putting, let's say, fertilizer on, etc.?
For sure. Especially in fields where you've got like wet areas, when you go out seeding, you don't want to get in there with ground equipment, but you also don't want to leave it because you're going to get weeds coming up as it dries out and that. So that's a really good application for for a drone to go out there and do seeding on that. And I think as we see some of these other like pesticides and that being allowed, the same thing will apply in there when you've got either time of year making it difficult to get out there with land equipment, or just heavy rain or something like that is stopping you. Drones really have a part to play then in that. Mm-hmm.
So Peter, that sort of leads on to your statement, Adrian, about the rescue treatment, or this is a really good tool when things may be too wet. And so the question is about scalability, right? So I look over your shoulder, and that looks like a pretty large piece of equipment there for a drone over your shoulder. At the same time, though, when we've got, so Pete says, with a 120-foot boom, a 1,600-gallon tank, it's a lot of acres to cover in a day. Do you see, drones replacing sprayers or as a complement to spraying?
No, I don't think that everyone should put their sprayers up for sale right now. Again, it's not going to be a direct replacement. There's a huge amount of work that, again, we work with a lot of very smart people in terms of deposition and pattern testing. Jason DeVoe was actually texting me just to, I was like, what's going on? But anyways, I make him scratch his head a lot as to where the spray is going. Again, if you do something like a pre-emerge or something, you can get a very nice, consistent spray with a field sprayer. And right now we're not seeing that quality of spray out of the spray drones. Again, streaking, a lot of questions that we really have to kind of address with the drones. And a lot of the difficulty is every year it seems like there's a new drone, new flagship, and right. Again, there's a T40 behind me, there's T50s out now. Again, a lot of the work we do is T30s with hydraulic nozzles. You just completely change the fluid delivery, and that really changes things a whole bunch. Productivity, again, the rates on the liquid, we're not necessarily going to always see the same carrier rates, and that's where, again, a lot of the difficulties come into question. Again, PMRA has a huge task to get these products approved. A lot of them aren't necessarily built to work at the carrier rates a drone wants to go to. Again, in the US, China, a lot of the countries, they want to spray at 2 gallons an acre or less. Well, they're just, a contact product can't work that way. That's not, again, to take a page out of Jason's book, if we have 100 people in one pizza, well, there's not enough pizzas to go around. So we need to have more pizzas, more carrier, and that's where again there's difficulty in essentially the way that spraying with drones is done in other countries or other areas, and the way that we want to do it here in North America. And we got a long ways to go, but it's still coming.
Mm-hmm.
I'll
George, go
maybe
ahead.
just jump in and mention a couple of things. So we've done some experimentation with swarms of drones,
Okay. Yep.
and that's one way of scaling rather than going, bigger drones, bigger tanks, to have like 5 drones that are swarmed and can cover then obviously 5 times as much as just a single drone. I think another area where it's going to be very useful is in spot spraying. So rather than, if you're thinking of applying something to your entire field, yeah, maybe drones are not that efficient. But if you go out there and identify some problem areas and you just want to do some spot spraying, then you've got a lot of benefits to using a drone over ground equipment. One of the biggest ones being compaction. You're not, and also destruction of the crop if it's already growing and driving through it. You're not making any contact with the crop at all. Just as another concept, I guess, we had a conference here this last summer at Olds College for agricultural journalists, actually. And they came from all over the world, and I was talking to a couple from Australia that were saying they're actually using it for spraying along roads, and that kind of freaked me out. So it's been approved in Australia for that. You see a highway and there's a drone flying in the ditch beside the highway spraying, and I thought, wow, yeah, Canada has a ways to go with our approvals here. When you
We
think
might
about
not
that
ever
kind
be
of
okay with that. Let's be honest. We maybe will have different rules,
Yeah.
potentially. Maybe we won't be okay with it. And maybe we will. I guess we'll find out. Okay. You two are heavily into this drone thing. Can I put in a request that we change the word swarm to something less scary? Can we say like aerial acrobatics or like some sort of formation? Maybe formation flying. I don't know, but I just
The
find
murder of
swarm.
crows is still sticking with you.
I'm just
The
saying.
murder of drones. That's
Yeah, a
murder
murder
of
of
drones,
drones,
yeah.
right? Come on, guys, help me
Well,
out. It's
I mean,
the crows.
even
Get it?
we've had requests to not use the word drone just because of its
Yeah.
military connotation as well. So,
Right, yeah.
they're,
For a while there, we were pretty keen to call them UAVs, right? Unmanned
Yeah.
aerial vehicles. But that term has sort of dropped off, and I think we do just use drone now. And yes, I suppose it has some negative connotation, but I'm going to go with I'll take drone, but let's get rid of swarm. Anyway, we'll deal with that in a minute. Okay, we're not going to solve all the world's problems tonight, but we're going to try. So now Ken's got a good question, and we've sort of touched on this in both your answers. So Ken asked, why are we limited to electric drones? Why not put a gas engine and want to make it a decent size? I feel like now we're just talking about helicopters. So Adrian, maybe I'll go to you first on this one. Do we need, as George says, if we go to aerial acrobatics or teamwork in the sky, swarms, do we need larger, or how do we figure out this question?
Essentially, the way that a conventional quadcopter or something would work, we need to have, again, motors that respond very rapidly. So the motors themselves need to be electric. Back, a long time ago, having little swash plates and little helicopter rotors that would move, it just not or it wouldn't work. So you'd essentially need a hybrid system. Again, the amount of fuel you're going to carry is a limitation. And again, as much as regulations don't necessarily see a giant LiPo battery that weighs 30 pounds as dangerous goods on the drone. They deal more with flammable liquids. So if you throw a fuel or kerosene or something in there, that's going to be more of a consideration on a safety standpoint. Although if ever you've seen one of these LiPos go off, it's very exciting. And then again, it's more so a power to weight thing. And I think this is kind of where right now we're seeing a bit of a glass ceiling in the technology. Again, a fully loaded T40 or T50 is only going to last about 7-8 minutes in the air before it runs out of power. it's just enough time to kind of balance out a spray. So we're actually kind of down to an efficient program where basically you can spray and just it'll be empty on battery by the time you come back. There's not too many times when you need an extended range. Again, you can balance that out with the reduced payload. So again, the new regulations coming into force will be up to 150 kilograms. I still think a lot of the manufacturers are struggling to get batteries that would actually be able to output us enough to actually do something, carry that much of a payload. You almost double the payload on this thing. That battery's going to last 3 minutes.
All right, so there you have it. A few different things that we covered there during the Agronomists. We did talk about payload. We talked about refill time. We talked about whether or not, we really will just continue to see larger and larger drones, sort of like we see in the sprayer world, of course, wider and wider booms, bigger and bigger tanks. But really, it's sort of this discussion of, which I found quite fascinating, is that, it's more likely that we see more drones per field versus larger and larger drones. As Adrian highlighted there, we then are limited by battery power and weight, and of course, adverse conditions, etc. But really, it comes down to, there are several applications for drones, and really, there's many things that we'll probably figure out going forward. But the spray question is not an easy to answer one. And we heard a bit of it there, but if you would like, head on over, watch the whole episode, or of course see plenty of our other coverage that we've had on drone spraying. And one of the key things here is that the spray pattern just isn't as predictable as it is of coming out of a spray boom. And because of that, we may see a point where, some products will potentially have drone application added to the label. So that would be on-label use. That would be perfectly legal to do once that's done. But that's not a guarantee that we're going to necessarily see, just because a herbicide gets approved for drone, that all herbicides are going to get approved for drone application. So this will be one of the things, and as alluded to there in that conversation about upcoming legislative changes, one of the things that we're keeping track of is what is allowed, what isn't. And of course, as we see PMRA update labels, that will be the key as to when producers, agronomists, drone applicators will get the green light to potentially use these bits of technology to do different things. So definitely some really cool applications, even without spraying with drones, but lots of interest as well. All right, it's time to take a break. We will be back right after this with more of RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM.
Whether you're in a career within an organization, starting your own business, looking for your dream job, running your own farm operation, operating a company in ag or food, or want to hone your overall life skills, this conference is for you. Celebrating over 10 years of bringing women in ag together, join the Advancing Women Conference in Niagara Falls on November 17th, 18th, and 19th. Visit advancingwomenconference.ca for more information and to register.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by FB Genetics Hybrid Fall Rye, innovative seed genetics for Canadian farmers. Contact your local FB Territory Manager to discuss your fall seed strategy and discover Hybrid Fall Rye's flexible end uses for marketing, milling, distilling, ethanol, and feed. Visit hybridfallrye.ca today. Joining me now is Kristin Thompson. She's the Interim Extension Coordinator with the BCRC, which is, of course, the Beef Cattle Research Council. Welcome here, Kristin.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right. So it is, 'tis the season, whether we want it to be or not, where many of us are staring down the barrel of maybe some cooler weather, starting that winter feed schedule. And that, of course, brings us back to the importance of feed testing. So maybe let's start there. Why is it so important to have a plan for feed testing for your herd?
Great way to start. Whether you are a cow-calf producer, have background in cattle, own a feedlot, understanding the nutritional qualities of the forage that you're feeding is paramount to maintaining animal health, welfare, and productivity. So feed testing, it not only allows you to develop appropriate rations that are going to meet the needs of your livestock based on their stage of production or class, it's also going to help you identify any nutritional gaps that may require further supplementation, such as nutritional deficiencies. It can help to prevent or identify any potential problems due to mycotoxins, nitrates, that kind of thing. It allows producers to economize feed use and make use of alternative feeds safely, as well as accurately price feed for buying and selling so that you can price that feed on a dollars per nutrient basis.
So really, I mean, hitting the big ones there, but thank you for bringing up, because I forgot about that one too. Certainly looking at really trying to head off any disasters as far as mycotoxin loads, or as you mentioned, nitrates, those sorts of things. And then of course it does bring up that question of supplementing with energy or protein, whichever one may be lacking, knowing ahead of time. In my mind, I always think about with livestock, it's cheaper to keep them in good condition than it is to try and catch up on nutrition.
You are very correct on that. It takes a lot more energy, protein, a lot more feed, a lot more cost in order to bring that body condition score back up for those cows, for sure.
Okay. Now, it does bring up the question, we've got, round bales, wrapped hay, we've got square bales, we've got maybe bags of silage. What's our approach, or what should be our approach for each of those? Maybe I'll start with, when we're talking about round bales, the direction at which I take a sample matters. So walk us through round bales first, and then I've got a couple questions about silage as well.
Okay. To start off on sampling, I just want to kind of highlight the first step before you're even taking that sample. The first step that you want to take is to separate those forages into lots based on, could be based on a number of factors, but the reason to do that is to allow for the most accurate estimate of the nutrient content of that forage. So these lots could be based on forage maturity, they could be based on variety, harvest date, they could be a single cutting or a single field. But the idea is to separate them based on the expected forage quality differences. So just as a quick example, if you've got an alfalfa stand and you get a first and second cut, keep those two cuts separate, sample them separately, test them separately so that you know what you're dealing with, because there will be some quality differences between a first and second cut. So moving on to sampling. A forage or a feed test is only as good as the sample that you submitted for testing. Very important to remember. And so you need to be sampling at the right time, using the right tools and techniques, and collecting the right number of samples. When it comes to dry baled forage, a forage probe is recommended rather than taking hand grab samples, because hand grab samples are more likely to contain a disproportionate levels of leaf to stem, right? You want to get a good leaf to stem ratio. On those, the forage probes should be 12 to 18 inches in length, about 3/8 to 3/4 inches in diameter. And they can be designed as a hand crank, so you're using your own power to drive that probe into the bale. It can be a lot of work. Or they can be attached to a cordless drill, which makes it a lot easier. So when you're using that forage probe, you want to insert it into the end of a square bale, whether it's a large square bale or a small square bale. You want to insert it between the twines and insert that probe all the way into that bale, pull it out, dump that core into usually a 1-quart zip bag, kind of heavy duty one you want to use so you don't get any puncturing of the plastic, and then seal that up for testing. When it comes to a round bale, you want to sample from the curved side of the bale. So, and the reason that we're sampling from the end of a square bale and the curved side of a round bale is that you're going through those layers of forage so that you're getting the best leaf to stem ratio to be most representative of what that forage is going to be like.
Right. And so it is, yeah. So one is from the end and one is from the rounded side. But really, if you think about it, it's so that the probe passes through several of those layers, whether they're round or flat, to get sort of a little chunk of each of them. Now, I will say from experience, use the drill, everybody. I don't know. Nobody needs a feats of strength trying to do the hand crank. Use the drill if you can. That makes it a lot easier. Now, and great point about the different lots, about, whether it's first cut, second cut, maybe it's a different field, maybe it's, right? We've got to have a representative sample of what we're actually trying to test. My question then becomes, I've got some wrapped feed. I know certainly many farmers that would have a bunk or a bag of silage. I would imagine that those are ones that I want to test when I open them. That, of course, makes me a little bit worried about turnaround time. So what's a good strategy for opening up something that's been ensiled and testing and getting those results back in a timely fashion?
So when it comes to silage that's in a bunk or a pit or a bag, you can actually sample those as they're being harvested and before they're covered and sealed and ensiled. The benefit of sampling at harvest is that it gives you an advanced knowledge of the quality of that forage going into the pit, which can give producers time to inventory and plan for feed purchasing based on that forage quality. So if you've got forage going in that's really low in protein, lower than you expected, you've got time to plan and purchase. If the silage has been packed and sealed properly and normal fermentation has occurred, you shouldn't be seeing a significant change in the nutrient profile, particularly when you're looking at the fiber and protein fractions. That being said, when you open up that pit or that bag, you want to do another sample just to verify that the fermentation has taken place appropriately and there's no significant changes in that nutritional quality, and then make adjustments appropriately. When you are sampling, you want to allow yourself a minimum of 2 weeks between when you take the sample and when you should expect the results to come back from the lab. Give yourself maybe 3 weeks just to be on the safe side, because you want to make sure that you've got that result back before you've got to feed that out. Another good thing about having the sample results from harvest is that when you open up a new bag of silage, the first portion of that silage is not going to be representative of what else is in the bag. So you actually want to feed out a small portion first and then take a sample so that it's more representative of what you're feeding for the next, 2 to 3 months out of that bag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense, right? You would likely have, if you're going to have pockets of spoilage, et cetera, those sorts of things likely going to happen sort of right at that front. So work your way in a little bit and get a better sense of what it actually is. Okay, so that's really good to know, sort of, or it's a good tip of looking ahead to where you may be able to head off an issue before that bag even gets opened. This all, though, does come down to, even if I've got a 2-week turnaround, let's say I have been very vigilant and got my feed tests and I have them in hand. What do I do with them, or who can help me with them? Because I will say I'm getting better at reading feed tests, but I think a lot of people, we look at them and we sort of have a couple numbers that we're dealing with. But who can help me actually go through what I get back on those results to actually start to put together a balanced ration or to meet the goals that I have for the livestock I'm feeding?
Good question. And it can be confusing. And when you look at all those numbers on a feed test, which ones do I focus on? Do I use dry matter? Do I use as fed? It's a lot to take in. My recommendation would be for producers to reach out to their local extension specialists or nutritionists if they do have questions. These experts are a really great resource on reading the feed test, providing pointers on how to use that feed, and also balancing rations. Mm-hmm. I'm based in Saskatchewan, so in Saskatchewan we have our Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture has regional offices located around the province. And they're a really good resource for these types of questions. Now, not all provinces have those regional offices, but there are typically extension offices around the province that can help out. There's also ration balancing software programs such as Cowbites, which is available through the BCRC at beefresearch.ca/cowbites. And it's a really user-friendly, easy-to-use tool for producers to balance their own rations. So they can take their water tests, their feed tests, and put those numbers in, and then choose their class of cattle, stage of production, environmental conditions, etc., and balance a ration that will appropriately use that feed based on the feed test.
Okay. Now, so good advice there certainly is, reaching out to local extension or your specialists or perhaps a nutritionist as well. And you mentioned water. So I know we're talking about, forage and feed testing here, but how critical is it to also test a water source when considering putting together a ration?
It is very critical, especially if you are dealing with poor quality water. Like if you're in an area or a region that's got historically poor quality water, testing that can be very critical, and it will have a significant impact on the nutrients that are available within that ration for the cattle. Because if you've got high sulfates in your water, that's going to bind up copper in your ration. So you might need to supplement extra copper, have a more bioavailable type of copper that's in your ration. So there are a lot of things to consider with water quality. Definitely very important.
Okay. Good advice there. I personally know people who have had sort of a mystery on their hands with feeding, and it turned out to be exactly as you said, sulfates in the water that were making other things unavailable in the ration. So it's not always something we think about when we're thinking about, minerals or supplementation, etc. So really key, and thank you for that. All right, Kristin, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much. Again, that's beefresearch.ca. is the BCRC. Kristin is interim extension coordinator. Thanks so much for joining me today, Kristin.
Yeah, no problem. It was great. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and I'll be back with our last segment of the day here on this Tuesday, September 3rd, right after this.
Apply anhydrous ammonia and protect your application earlier than normal this fall. Defend against potential losses and protect your bottom line with Centuro Nitrogen Stabilizer. Patented active ingredient pronitridine offers agronomically effective protection where it matters most, below ground. Easy to handle Centuro is also non-corrosive for fewer worries about downtime or equipment damage. Start early with Centuro as part of your nitrogen management plan. Contact your local retailer or visit centuro.ca for more information today.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hepner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. I am your host for this Tuesday, September 3rd, Lyndsey Smith. And, well, I wish I was closing out the show with much better news. But before we get to that, this segment is brought to you by Koch Agronomic Services. The answer to your above-ground nitrogen loss problem is Anval Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Anval's dual active ingredients deliver extended protection, visit kochag.ca. That's KOCHAG.ca. All right, as promised, hopping to the biggest news story of the day. Frankly, if there were other things going on, we've pretty much spent the whole day on this one anyway. So in case you missed it, which have you been living under a rock? China has or plans to retaliate on Canada's decision to impart a 100% tariff on EV vehicles coming out of China. So Kelvin Hepner, of course, he's our news hound. He's got all the details on this one, or as many as we have as of showtime. This morning, we woke to news that China is launching an anti-dumping investigation into canola imports from Canada. So while this is, of course, still an investigation, if anybody's watching the markets today, you'll see that, well, canola tanked. According to Statistics Canada, exports of canola seed to China in 2023 calendar year totaled nearly 4.6 million tons. That was a bounce back from the 2.2 million in 2022. If anybody remembers, there was some banning happening then as well. Now, the Chinese government says that it will also file a formal dispute at the World Trade Organization over Canada's proposed tariffs on the Chinese EVs. They're also going to launch an anti-discriminatory investigation under China's foreign trade law into Canada's tariffs on Chinese EVs, steel, and aluminum. And, as mentioned, the anti-dumping investigation into canola and also certain chemical imports from Canada. Now, I did reach out to the Canola Council to try and get an interview in time for Showtime. We could not make that happen, but we did receive the following statement from the Canola Council. So Chris Davison, he is the president and CEO of the Canola Council of Canada, says China is an important and valued market for Canadian canola. We are confident that an investigation into Canada's canola trade with China will demonstrate alignment with and reinforce our support for rules-based trade. The Canola Council adds that they are awaiting further details on the investigation and are working closely with the federal government on the situation. Chris Davison says working to maintain open and predictable trade for canola is a top priority of the Canola Council. We will continue to engage on this issue to support market access and competitiveness for Canadian canola in this key market. Now, we also did, so Calvin did reach out to the Minister of Agriculture, Lawrence Macaulay, and they did provide a comment for the story today. Macaulay says, Canadian canola is the best in the world, and our producers depend on and play by a rules-based global trading order that provides reliable market access. Today's announcement is deeply concerning, and I am working with my colleagues across government and in the sector to monitor developments closely. The quality of Canadian canola is well known around the world. We will continue to defend and support the sector every step of the way. All right, so we will have Chris Davison with the Canola Council on likely tomorrow's show. We're working hard to get that interview. Certainly would love your feedback on this story. I think all of us in especially Western Canada, where 21 million acres of this crop is grown, are on the edge of our seats here, recognizing that this has the potential to be an incredibly costly trade altercation between Canada and China. And it'll be farmers, of course, who are going to suffer the most on this one. So we are watching this carefully, trying to get a sense of what the impact could be, if there is a way to manage the risk on this one. All of those are questions we, of course, still don't have answers for, but are continuing to work on. So we'll leave it there for now. We will be continuing, obviously, to follow this story. I would recommend, if you don't visit RealAgriculture.com often, now would be the time to do so. Kelvin will be updating this story probably several times more before it goes into the emails tomorrow. So if you're looking for the latest on this, head on over to the website. There we'll have all the quotes that we're gathering and any interviews as well. And of course, you can find us across social media at Real Agriculture, X, Facebook, Instagram, you name it, it's there. But if you want to read what's happening, head on over to RealAgriculture.com. All right, let's leave it there for now. As mentioned, we'll have much more on this story tomorrow. Your regular host, Sean Haney, will be back in the driver's seat as well. I believe he's working out getting some market intel as well to talk about the potential move in the markets on this one. As usual, it is Wednesday tomorrow, and I, of course, will be back for the issues panel on Friday. Looking forward to it. So thank you, of course, for joining me on today's show. Thank you to all my guests for making it happen. I really appreciate it. And this is your reminder. Get on out there and get all that forage tested. Right? Okay. If you've got any feedback, 1-855-776-6147, or you can send me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. I got some great emails over the weekend on some feedback on some of the polls we've been doing, on some of the discussions we've been having on topics of adopting technology, etc. And I really do appreciate everyone who takes time out of their day to let us know how we're doing and what you'd like to see more of on the show and on Real Agriculture. So thank you so much. Cheers, everybody. We'll talk to you on Friday.